was physiotherapy and drugs. No one suspected that my backache could be caused by cancer. Who would relate backache to cancer? The doctors had this mental block. One doctor in University of Michigan came closer to making a prediction. She said, I don't see any reason you should have cancer. Your back is in good shape, but she could not overcome this mental block. So I lived with this cancer for 15 years. One day I felt very sick, extremely sick. My wife took me to an emergency center, and the doctor gave me a CAT scan and came back to me and said, he was a very compassionate doctor, one of the best I've known. He said, sorry, you have cancer. So lymphoma, which is the only liquid cancer, by the way. They rushed me to a hospital about 15 miles away. The first doctor to see me in that hospital was a doctor from India. He looked at my CAT scan and said, lymphoma has surrounded your kidneys and your life is in danger. He emphasized this again and again and again, that let me do surgery to remove this lymphoma from around your kidneys. I did not trust him, and I did not submit to surgery. For some reason, I don't know why I made that decision, and later I found that that was a correct decision. So I came back to my city, 50 miles back, and did not know what to do. We had a neighbor, a lady who was a nurse, and we talked with her to see what she thinks. Nurses have a great deal of insight about just about every disease. She said, my recommendation is, we have a daughter in Louisville, Kentucky. She says, my recommendation is that you should go to Kentucky. They probably would be better equipped to deal with your cancer. So we had fortunately a friend in Kentucky, in Louisville, Dr. Cyrus, in English, is called Cyrus, the name of the king. He is a wonderful doctor, very compassionate. He made an appointment with the hospital, and my wife drove about 400 miles to Louisville. So I was admitted to the hospital, and chemotherapy was performed. As you know, chemotherapy is extremely powerful poison, and many people die from chemotherapy before they die from cancer when they receive chemotherapy. So it made me extremely weak. I could not walk without a walker. So there was a doctor who was in charge. He was looked very powerful. He walked like a king. He had an entourage of people who walked with him. He would come to me every day to see how I'm doing and make some notes. He would give some direction to the nurses. He had little feelings. Really, I did not see any sign of compassion in him. But the opposite was true with the nurses. The nurses were extremely kind and compassionate. They cared for me, and this was the good side. Just to tell you what could happen in the hospital. One night I was sound asleep. A nurse, black lady, came and woke me up. I said, why do you wake me up? She smiled and said, I must weigh you. I was amazed. Would you wake me up when I need to rest most than any more than any other time, to weigh me. She smiled and said, "This is protocol. This is the routine that they must perform." While in the hospital, after I received the chemotherapy, they kept giving me many drugs. Every day they would a handful of drugs to go to protect me. Of course, that's their intention. But I'm very skeptical of drugs. And each time I would ask, what is the reason? What is the purpose of this drug? And sometimes I would, when I felt that the drug was unnecessary, I would refuse to take the drug. One lady, I remember, she would come with some kind of a container, and she would say, "It's breathing time." And she would go from room to room to give some kind of a vapor that opens your lungs. You probably have had it sometime when you had bronchitis or some lung problems. And I would tell her, "I'm breathing fine. I don't need this." She said, "No, this is the protocol. You need to take some." And I often refuse to take it, except maybe I take a couple of breaths just to make it look that I'm taking the drug. It was absolutely unnecessary, and this drug is dangerous and can cause stroke, actually. So what happened as a result of a drug that they gave me, a blood thinner, and as a result of chemotherapy, my stomach started to bleed, profuse bleeding. One day, when my wife was feeding me, I could not sit very much. I was out lying down most of the time, all the time, except take a walk with the walker. While I was having food, all of a sudden I opened my mouth. I became unconscious. She knew that this is serious. I may be dying. So she started yelling and calling people, the hospital, to come to my aid. And many people, as many as 4 or 5 nurses, came and to see what's going on. They suspected that I'm bleeding, and they gave me 8 pints of blood, 8 pints, to bring me to a minimum level. If they had to bring me to the ideal level, they probably would have to give me 8 more pints. So that giving me blood saved me temporarily. But they said, "We need to have a surgery in your stomach. It's bleeding." And they did surgery and they stopped the bleeding. But this doctor who had no feelings came up with another idea. He said, you should have colonoscopy. I said, why should I have a colonoscopy? My blood test shows that I am not bleeding. Everything looks very good. The surgery was successful. But he was suspicious that I was bleeding in my intestine. But there was no reason for this. But I was afraid that he may turn against me. I submitted to his order, and I was turned out to be right. There was no bleeding in my intestine, and it was a great deal of pressure, invasive procedures at the time when I did not need it. In the meantime, we have a rather large Baha'i community in Louisville, Kentucky. They came to visit me, comfort me. And the star, of course, was Dr. Cyrus, Dr. Cyrus, who would come every other day and spend 1 hour with me. Can you imagine a doctor who is so busy would come and spend so much time? While I was in the hospital, I can never remain silent. I spoke with the nurses and to teach them about something spiritual. My style of talking to people is I seldom talk about the Baha'i faith. I usually start with God. that's a subject that most people do not feel that you're imposing your beliefs on them. They already believe in God, so they feel good about learning more about God. I asked those nurses, and turned out to be 14 of them, if they like to receive a book. I have written a book. It's called The Spiritual Design of Creation. If you would like to receive a book on God. And they all said yes. They gave me their address. And when I came back home, I sent them that book. Among these nurses, there was one who was also a star, like Dr. Cyrus. She became so fascinated by my ideas about God and the Baha'i faith. You will not believe this, but she would bend on her knees for half an hour to listen to me. Although I was weak, I could speak talk quite well. And she was fascinated with what I had to say. So I introduced her to Dr. Sirus, and she went to some Baha'i fireside, and she declared, and then her husband declared, and then they sent their two children to Baha'i school. So sometimes I say, maybe it was worth having a cancer. I was able to lead 4 people to the faith. Going back to my story of cancer, as you know, one chemotherapy seldom cures a person with cancer. They usually need to get multiple treatments. So this proud and powerful doctor said, your second chemotherapy is getting late. You must either get it here or get it right soon after you go back home. So my wife, again, she actually been such a great help. I drove back 400 miles back home, and I decided to get, I believe that getting a second chemotherapy was sentence to death. I knew I had become so weak from the first chemotherapy that I was sure that if I got a second, I would die. My heartbeat was at 100, sometimes higher than 100. How could my heart actually take so much poison? In fact, one of my dear friends who had cancer received drugs, and he died from the drug that caused him a heart attack. He did not die from cancer. So I was very skeptical. I did not want to get a second chemotherapy, but I decided to consult with 2 other doctors. There was a doctor in a nearby city called Midland. He was a doctor from Africa. I made an appointment, and he said, yes, you need a second chemotherapy. You're not going to recover from one chemotherapy. I did not still, he said, the way he talked was like giving you chemotherapy is like inviting you to a restaurant for dinner. He said, every Tuesday, Wednesday, I give chemotherapy. Just come to the hospital and I will give you, people stand in line and I'll give you your chemotherapy. Fortunately, I did not listen to him. And I went to another doctor. He was from India in our own town. He also confirmed that you're not going to recover from one chemotherapy. You must definitely get second and most likely third treatment. I told him, I really do not want to do so. I know my body cannot endure another chemotherapy. I was so weak, you cannot imagine. I could not walk very easily. He said, I asked him, would you give me a CAT scan? Maybe I have recovered. He was extremely skeptical and said, no way. But if you promise to accept chemotherapy after CAT scan, I will order a CAT scan. I said, reluctantly, I said, yes, I will accept. So I was given a CAT scan. What do you think there was the result? You guess. There was no sign of cancer. I had recovered within 1 month. This was about 1 month after I returned from the hospital. This CAT scan was done. No sign of cancer. The judgment of 3 specialists was wrong. 3 specialists who study, specialize in cancer, they all made a mistake. And somehow I was guided to refuse their direction, and I was right. Dr. Seros, later after I recovered, told me that when you came to the hospital, we had no hope for your recovery. Your cancer was so advanced. It was stage 4 probably. It was so advanced, we did not believe you would recover. But fortunately, they did not tell me. And I think this was a great idea. If they told me, I think it would have made a negative impression on me. I was very hopeful that I would recover. So this is the story of my cancer up to about 2 years ago. Yes, about 2 years ago, I decided to have a CAT scan. What a big mistake I made. I want to tell you why this was a big mistake. I was curious, just absolute curiosity. How could I, maybe, when you have cancer, it often comes back, it returns. So I was curious. I went to this emergency center, the same one. And contrary to the last time that I faced a compassionate doctor, I faced a doctor just the exact opposite. He ordered CAT scan, but what he did that harmed me was a test for contrast. The inject iodide is extremely dangerous poison. And there was no reason, absolutely no reason for him giving me that injection. Later, I spoke with a Baha'i doctor and he confirmed this. There was no reason that they should have given you this test. And if you give this test to a patient, you must give them a lot of water so you get this poison out of their body. He did not do that either. He did not give me any directions about this. So without my consent, he should have asked to receive. Later, I found out that in the hospital in our town, when there is any reason for you to give this injection, you must sign a paper that you have read this information, you know the dangers of this drug, you have consented to receive this drug. He did not do that either. Aside from this, he injected me with many other drugs that cause convulsion. While I was at the hospital, I had great convulsion, and he was giving me other drugs to quiet me down. It was the most difficult time in my life during a couple of hours in that center. So what happened afterwards was worse than cancer. There was a massive burning on my skin. So bad that even if clothes touched my skin, I would feel pain. Itching, constant itching, was like throwing into the fire. So I went to at first I went to a nurse to see what she says. She was terrified when you look at the skin and said, there is nothing I can do. A nurse practitioner, that's what she was. She sent me, made an appointment with a skin specialist. The skin specialist said, you have, what is the name of the disease? I forgot the name. He misdiagnosed me, and he gave me a drug for that disease. I should remember the name. Yeah, yeast infection. Okay. He said, you have yeast infection and gave me a drug for yeast infection. I told him that I don't think this is yeast infection. This is a result of that drug, but he refused to accept my diagnosis. So I took the drug. The drug was not that harmful. There are two kinds of drugs for yeast infection. I knew about this. And she gave me, fortunately, the safer drug. And I took the drug, and later, when taking the drug, visited him. He said, are you better? I said, no. He said, therefore, you do not have yeast infection. I went to another doctor from India. He was also a skin specialist. He prescribed ointment that is used for people who have skin cancer. And then I went to the first skin doctor. He said, don't use it. This could harm you, could harm your skin. But the original skin doctor gave me some kind of ointment, had no impact. It didn't make any difference. I went back to him and I told him I'm not improving. So he tried to cover up these wounds, these burning places, by giving me bandage. He said, put bandage on it. Couldn't believe that. I followed his direction. No impact, no benefit from this. So here I was, and my own doctor also said yeast infection. So three doctors all misdiagnosed my disease. Here I am with a disease worse than cancer, burning, difficult to sleep. You cannot imagine how difficult this was. So I tried to do my own research to see what I could do for my skin. And after a great deal of research, I discovered two ointments. One is called comfrey. Comfrey is a herb that has oil in it. So I would boil this and get some oil out of it and apply this oil to all those burning points. And it seemed to help. It seemed to help me. I also use oxygenated olive oil. Oxygenated olive oil gives your skin oxygen. And when you give oxygen to the skin, it helps you to feel better. And finally, a doctor said in a newsletter, castor oil is also really good for your skin. And I followed these with a great deal of suffering. I think this disease aged me at least 5 years. This skin disease caused me to age 5 years because I was in excellent shape, but I've never been back to that, to what I was before. Now, 2 years have passed, and I am 70% better. Still, some skin problems continue, and I still have to oil my body continuously. The last question is, why did I have cancer? I followed the best diet. I've always been interested in health and nutrition and had the best diet. And my story starts, the reason I had cancer goes back to the time when I was 15 years of age. I'm 78 now. 87, I'm sorry, 87. It goes back to the time when I was 15, and I started bleeding. I had inherited a disease that caused me bleeding from my nose and from my intestines. I had profuse bleeding that I cannot believe anyone could survive with so much loss of blood. So my brother took me a doctor at that time. He was one of the best. He was a professor at university. This was in Iran, not in this country. He was a professor and had a good reputation. But little bit did we know about his dishonesty, unfortunately. So he said, I can give you injection, 6 injection, and you will recover. So for 6 weeks, I would go to his office. He would give injection to my intestines, which was painful. And this lasted for 6 weeks while I was losing a lot of blood. As I said, I cannot believe anyone has so much blood that I lost. I believe that an invisible hand was there to protect me from death. So I told him, I have not recovered. So he said, he wrote a prescription and said, okay, go to the pharmacy and take this drug. I went to the pharmacy and asked, what is this drug that he's recommending? He said it's vitamin K. I said, what does vitamin K do? He said, it thickens your blood. I knew that this was fraud. There is no way you could thickening my blood and stop the bleeding. So I went, there was a committee at that time, Baha'is doctors who would help anyone with health problems. So I made an appointment and visited this committee. There were about a half a dozen of them, maybe 8, 9, 10. And they immediately said, you need surgery. And they introduced me a doctor, which I would name him because he was a wonderful doctor, Dr. Jayhoon, who has passed away by now. He is in charge of a hospital outside Tehran, outside the city of Karaj. You go and visit him. I visited him and he immediately ordered surgery. So in those days, there were no cars. I took a couple of buses to get to his hospital. And he immediately performed surgery on my intestines and put a tube in my intestines that remained there for 10 days. And it was so painful that I could not sleep for 10 days. 10 days a night. I was awake from pain. And I could eat only yogurt. Was the only food that was, I think, the best food he could have chosen. I had yogurt. And he was so compassionate that he told the staff in the hospital that if there is any sign of bleeding during this period, day or night, he asked them to call him. He would come from city of Tehran. His home was in Tehran. Even midnight, anytime, he would drive and come to my rescue. He was that compassionate. Fortunately, there was no bleeding, and I was released from the hospital after 10 days. But before I was released, the nurse came to me and said, I want to tell you a secret. When we gave you anesthetics, we gave you too much, and we almost lost you. So that was another brush with death. In those days, everything was primitive. It wasn't like today. So here I was with little blood in my body, and the consequence of so much loss of blood was this: another disease. My stomach could not produce acid to digest food. Imagine if you eat food and food stays in your stomach, doesn't move. Only acid can move your food to your stomach. So for a short time, my mother would give me, only thing I could eat was white flour, a little white flour, means something very sour. It's called yogurt in Persian. It's derived from yogurt and it is very sour. She would mix these, and that's the only thing I could eat because it produces acid, enough acid for me to stay alive. So there was a hospital by a very rich Baha'i doctor, Dr. Misaghiye. He had established this hospital, and they provided all kinds of services to all kinds of people. It was probably the best hospital. I went to that hospital to see how I could recover from this indigestion. No blood, no digestion. There was a doctor, his name was Dr. Rostin. He was a wonderful believer, wonderful Baha'i who had been imprisoned in Yazd for accusations made against him and against the whole assembly, Baha'i assembly, in a murder case that was by someone else, and they tried to blame the believers, the Baha'is. She was just amazing person. He had been trained in France, and he knew a secret that I would like to share with you if you have any digestion problems. He had taught in France that anyone who has the problem with digestion use bitter herbs. There are certain herbs that are bitter to the taste, and they have amazing powers. I don't know if even 1 in 1,000 doctors is aware of the power of these bitter herbs, even today, after so many decades. But he knew that secret. Imagine if he had not saved me at the right time, I would not be alive. So he would prescribe certain herbs to pharmacy, and the pharmacy would make it for me. I would take a spoonful of this herb and then have my food. Lo and wonder, this is a miracle. There was a miracle. I began to digest my food, and this kept me alive. Then soon after this period, I decided to come to the United States because of discrimination. I could not become a teacher. That's another story. So I came to the United States, and there were no bitters here. I had internet did not exist today. Doctor did not know. I had no knowledge where I could get this bitter herbs, but I continued to search for answers. And fortunately, I found one doctor in the United States, Dr. Jonathan Wright, who was one of the best preventive doctors in this country. He's written a book called Your Stomach Needs Acid. And he recommended, by reading his literature, he recommended that I should take acid capsules. So I started taking hydrochloric acid capsules. And once I talked with him by phone, he was on the radio, and he said, I haven't seen only one case as severe as your case, with so little acid that your body can produce. Therefore, I started taking hydrochloric acid capsules on the average, maybe 5 or 6 with breakfast, 5 or 6 with lunch, 8 or 9 or 10 with dinner. So this lasted a long time. I would estimate about 25 years. And I may have taken as many as 20,000, imagine 20,000 capsules. These are not what the body produces. There are harmful ingredients made, mixed with these capsules. And I believe that was the only reason I believe I would have cancer. I have not inherited any genes for cancer. I have not seen any cancer in my relatives. And I followed the best diet, and yet I had this severe disease. I have studied nutrition for as many as 70 years. Because of my health problems in Iran, I began to go to the biggest library. It was a governmental library that had the best collection of books. I would read books even at that time to help myself, and continue to read when I came back to the United States. At present, I received 2 newsletters. One by Dr. Schallenberger, these are medical doctors, the other one by Jonathan Wright. And I also subscribe to Life Extension magazine, which gives you a lot of information, and they can answer you and help you if you have a problem. They can email you the latest research on any topic. So my story, I hope, will show you some lessons that you can apply in your life. Before I finish, I always like to have something spiritual. I believe an invisible hand enters into our life when it is needed. God seldom intervenes in our life, but if there is a good reason for it, he intervenes. And maybe there was a reason that I should stay alive. At the end of my talk, I like to tell you my other brushes with death. Here I had 3 brushes in my cancer, but I had other brushes with death that I would like to share with you. So you know, an invisible hand was protecting me. My first brush with death happened when I was a baby. In those days, there were no air conditioning. When it was warm weather arrived, people would sleep outdoors. So my parents slept outdoors, and they have a swimming pool, it wasn't a swimming pool, it was a pool of water that they use for washing clothes, washing dishes, that sort of thing. We slept outdoors, and I was near the pool, and somehow I moved and fell into this pool of water, which was not clean water, that good. I fell into this water. My parents were sound asleep. And what do you think saved my life? We had a dog called Fidel. I always remember Fidel Castro when I remember that dog. That's the most common name for dogs in Iran, Fidel. This dog started barking, and its barking woke up my parents. And sure enough, they found out that I was missing, and they find me in a pool of water, saved me. I apparently had not, it was immediate. So this dog actually saved my life. My second brush with death was that there was a terrible storm in Iran. I probably was 10, 12 years old, and the roof gave in. And they used blocks in those days, bricks and clay blocks and bricks. And these fell all around my pillow. One of them could have killed me. One piece of those blocks were heavy, yet they were around my pillow. None of them hit my head. The third brush with death was when my father was away. My mother was in a hospital because of an accident. 2 brothers, my brother and I, we were elementary school children. It was winter time, and they use charcoal. They use corsi. If you live in Iran, you know what that means. And charcoal to warm themselves up is a very interesting invention. And we could not make the coal, and so we put a kerosene lamp. And sure enough, this corsi, which is made of wood and then blankets on top of it, got fire, and we were sound asleep. We had an extra room we had rented to the principal of elementary school. He was a very nice person. One night, the same night that we had this fire was going on in our room, we were sound asleep. For some reason, he was out late. So he came home maybe at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, whatever, I don't know. He immediately he noticed the smoke, and he woke us up. I think we could have suffocated from a smoke, both of us at that time. The fourth one, which I covered, basically was loss of blood, that I lost so much blood that I cannot believe anyone has that much blood. I vomited. Blood was so coming so fast from through my nose that it was going also into my stomach, and I vomited about a quarter of blood from my stomach. The fifth one was, I told you about the ether. They gave me too much ether during anesthetics. The next, my next brush with death was when I was in Italy visiting my wife's grandfather. He was a pioneer in Milan, Italy. And their system of heating is they economize. They don't have hot water all the time. So they turn on a gas stove to heat water just for the time you take a bath. So my father-in-law turned on the heat, and I started taking my bath, not knowing that for some mysterious reason, the flame had died, and the small carbohydrate poison was pouring into the bathroom. And I started losing my breath. I was breathing faster and faster. I had no idea what's going on. And the more I breathed, of course, the more I would breathe poison. At that critical moment, my father-in-law came to see what was going on, and he found the reason and saved me. The seventh brush with death was I was driving, got close to a railroad, and I saw a train coming. I decided, I thought, should I go or should I not go? So I made the wrong decision and decided to go. I pushed on the gas too much, and my car passed the railroad and it stopped just a little bit off the railroad. Within, I would say 5 seconds, 5 or 6 or 7 seconds, the train arrived, and I had no time to get out of my car. I would have no time. So that was another brush with death. My eighth brush with death was when we had a flood in our town, covered the road, and our basement, which is unfinished basement, was filled with water. I think about as many as 3 or 4 feet of water. I wore some waders and went to the basement to see what's going on, not knowing that there were 2 connections to electricity. So I spent 15 minutes in a pool of electricity without touching anything, and that was, I saved my life. And the ninth brush with death is that 2 times, it happened 2 times, but I counted as once. I had drugs, I had severe reaction to drugs. In one of them, I fainted, and I dreamed that I wanted to enter a city in a country, but I did not have any visa. I was not permitted. And the other one was that the reaction to the drug kills. I think I think the statistics shows that more than 100,000 people die from reaction to drugs. And these are some of the unknowns. The news media does not allow people to know what's going on in the country. They just want to make people believe that the politicians and the news media are doing a good job. But I like to share with you a little piece before I finish. John Hopkins University is one of the foremost medical schools in this country. And they had the courage to reveal a secret that no one wants to know. All of those in a position of power would do anything to hide this information. They came up with this discovery. I don't know how many of you know this. It should become known to everyone that 240,000 people die in this country alone from medical, they call it medical.
The connection's a little bit out. Could you repeat that again? Is that my connection, or is everyone else having this issue too?
That's Hushidar's connection, John.
Maybe the government shut them off.
Okay. Could you please repeat what you were saying?
No, I can't hear it either.
Yeah, he disappeared completely.
Well,
I can hear everybody else. I just can't. I think we lost him.
Yep.
okay. So until then, we will be resuming our connection. We'll be having him join us again. Sorry about that little interruption there. So I don't have answers to the questions that people are asking.
That's a big surprise. I was amazed what he was saying. It's more than question.
Yes. So in terms of the kind of back pain that Dr. Motlagh had, that question. So he did describe it that it was a sharp pain, and we can ask him that definitely. That's a good question to ask. It says the hydrochloric acid, it didn't help. It did help. That's what he was treated with when he was taking the hydrochloric acid. When he was lacking his own stomach acid, he was supplementing with something that would generate that.
Yeah, but I thought he said at the end that he thought that that was the reason why he got the cancer, because he took 20,000 tablets in his lifetime. I was confused on that point. Did anybody else catch that?
Yes,
That
I
was his
said it
observation.
because of the hydrochloric capsules that he took. So I got the same I got the same meaning that you had.
Meaning me, Susan?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah,
because I would like to hear from him again if that's what he intended to say, because I mean, it seemed like it seemed like he was taking it for such a long time and that it was helping him. Otherwise, he would have, I mean, I just was confused on that point. I would like to know more.
Of course, of course.
Are
So it
you
looks like
Are you
Dr.
able to?
Motlagh is joining through Michael's account. Michael Hyde. In the moment, we should be able to make sure that's the case. Hi, Michael. Do you want to unmute? I think you are with Dr. Motlagh right now.
Yes. All right.
We're disconnected.
Are we there? Is that better?
Yes, it's better.
Yes.
Okay, I
Okay.
don't know where we're at the point we were
You
disconnected.
talked about John Hopkins. You talked about Johns Hopkins, and then you
John
dropped off after that.
Yes. John Hopkins University is one of the best known universities in this country, maybe in the world. They had the courage to reveal the number of people who die from medical mistakes. They came up with this amazing number. They said every year, 240,000 people die from medical mistakes in this country alone. You cannot imagine the number throughout the world. Yet this information remains unknown. How many people really know this? The news media wants to keep it a secret. Doctors do not want anyone to know about it because they lose their confidence in medical establishment. So if we include doctors' failure, I think it all goes to medical school to train doctors. Medical school teach doctors to believe that the only cure for disease is drug. They do not teach them nutrition. They have very little information they receive about nutrition. And if we include the failure of the system,
All right. We dropped off again.
I blame medical and the doctor.
We dropped off
What is the
again.
problem?
I don't know.
Okay,
All right. We are still connected. No, the mute is not on. So,
Maybe it's best to shut down the video so you don't use the
Yes.
bandwidth. This way the
I
audio
think it is
is sufficient.
to end, before I get to this.
can you hear us though? That's the question.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes.
I
All right.
think you should eliminate anything after this. Johns Hopkins University. I will cover that next time about nutrition and prevention. Maybe that doesn't belong to this topic, and maybe I should have avoided entering into this topic. I think I am done with my presentation. I hope and pray that I have revealed some knowledge that you can use in your own life. And the next topic, prevention, is by far the most significant topic, and it will have practical benefits to all of you. May God bless you. Thank you for listening. I'm done. If you have any questions, please ask.
Can we just ask?
Yes, Susan, please ask your
Okay.
question. Yes.
Dr. Motlagh, thank you so much for the presentation and giving us your life story. Very compelling, and many of us have had these incredible brushes with death, for sure. My question is, I was a little unclear about when you said that you were using hydrochloric acid for, I don't know, was it 20 years or something? I can't remember. You said you had used like 20,000 tablets through your life, and that you thought that was the reason that you got the cancer, or did I make a mistake there?
No, this is a point I cannot prove or disprove. I can only suspect that the only thing that I did that was unnatural and harmful during this period was taking these capsules at the amount. If you may take a few capsules here and there, the body can cope with it. But when you use that much, something man-made with other harmful ingredients for so long, it has to have an impact on your body, must affect your immune system. And I cannot see any reason. As I said, in my heredity, I don't have any genes for cancer.
But what would have been the
Pardon?
alternative? What would have been the alternative for you, because you were having all these problems with stomach, not producing stomach acid? What would have been the alternative if you hadn't have taken the medication? Could you have been maybe worse? You see what I'm saying? I mean, did you not, I mean, apple cider vinegar is supposed to help with producing a little bit more stomach acid. That's been touted in the last decade or so. Had you considered doing something like that, or do you find that to be a more natural way of doing it?
There is no way you could take enough vinegar to produce that much acid. You know, the amount of acid that body produces is about a quart of something like that of acid. Amount is incredible. So you would have to drink a quart of vinegar with every meal. That would harm your throat, and it would be impossible to drink that much vinegar. The alternative would have been to continue the bitter drugs that I was prescribed, as I told you. These bitter herbs. These herbs, as far as I know, they are not harmful. In fact, bitter herbs have many medicinal benefits. They can help you in many ways. And I'm still taking, actually, at this point, I'm taking these bitter herbs, continue to take these bitter herbs, and I'm sure to the rest of my life. And if I did not take these bitter herbs, I would have problems with that digestion. So that was the alternative. But when I came to the United States, I have no way of knowing where to get them. There was no way that I could find this information. There was no internet at that time. And I do not know where I could. So Dr. Wright's recommendation seemed practical, and he was an extremely knowledgeable doctor. So I followed his advice, not knowing what would be the consequence. If I had known the consequence, maybe I would have avoided taking this drug, these capsules, and try to find something else. It seemed safe at the time.
And one final question to that point. I'm so sorry to keep it going. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
What are herbal bitters? Could you tell me what those are? Could you tell us what those are?
Yes. A number of companies make bitters, liquid bitters. One of the best known is Swedish bitters. I suppose they come from Sweden. And that is the best known. And there are other companies who make this. All you need to do is to search for bitter herbs and some other substances are bitter. For instance, green tea, the extract from green tea is bitter. As you know, green tea, Baha'u'llah recommended white tea at that time to the believers when no one knew about green tea and white tea. And white tea is actually better than green tea because it's the fresh leaves and they contain more antioxidants and they taste better. Yet everywhere you hear about green tea, seldom about white tea. So this extract from, I get it, extract from green tea, there is no other kind, is bitter. So I open 2 capsules, mix it with aloe vera juice, which is an excellent juice in moderation, and take it before meal. And there are other substances that I can maybe next time, if you're interested, look for and tell you. What you can do is when you buy herb, taste it. And if it is bitter, that's the best candidate. You need to mix it with a little bit of aloe vera juice and drink it before you have your meal. In fact, Baha'u'llah in his tablet of to a doctor, he says, drink liquid before solid. And this may be one answer to people who have indigestion, to have a little bit of liquid, bitter liquids before they eat. It will enhance their digestion, and it has many benefits for them. Many benefits. Everything God created is good. So just we don't know what they can do for us. Like comfrey that I use for my skin is all lack of knowledge that we suffer. Yes, many bitters on the market. You can search for it in the internet. Any other question?
Yes, Alex Boyson had a question, and his question was, as we all face constant dangers to health, mentality, etc., what do you figure you did right in life to allow you to be preserved from the greatest tests as experienced?
Yes. Everyone knows that we hear often that people go to doctors for most reason because of pressures. And in a tablet to the physician, Baha'u'llah talks about these pressures, that all of our feelings directly connected to our body. And we produce a hormone that is very harmful when we are under stress, we are angry, we are jealous, we are anxious. Any negative feeling produces negative hormones that affect and control our health. I believe that my knowledge of God, Baha'u'llah said that the reason we have been created is to know God and love God. This is the very reason we come to the world, and many people live without paying any attention to God. And they just say, I believe in God, but they really do not know God. Never Baha'u'llah said to believe in God, he said to know God. So I have spent all my life searching, reading, finding answer to mysteries of life. And when I was 27, between years 27 and 29, I was in Iran, worked part-time, and made a determination to read one volume every week. And in 2 years, I read 100 volumes. These were every Baha'i book that was in print at that time. So by having some spiritual connection to the creator of the universe, imagine the honor of speaking to one who created the universe. And we are told that when we remember God, he remembers us. Imagine the honor of being remembered by the creator of the universe when you remember God. This is the power that can lift our soul from the suffering. This world is not made for pleasure and enjoyment. We are told that this world, this life is a place of testing. God tests each of us by our reaction to adversity, especially adversity. This is the ultimate test of our character. And we are told that adversity is a ladder to which we can rise. You can use this ladder to go down or go up. And I believe that all my life I have faced adversity and I use it to go up. I've never lost my trust in God, never lost my love for God. And I think the greatest power that has saved me through all these pains and pressures, and I only touch on some of them. If I told you about the rest of them, you would be amazed how could anyone survive. This connection with God and recognizing that adversity is actually a positive force in our life, not negative. We should thank God, appreciate God when we are experiencing pain and suffering. This is a blessing. In the hidden words, Baha'u'llah said, adversity, my calamity is a blessing from God. So when we understand the design of creation, then adversity touches us, but not as much as would touch other people. Maybe is reduced by 80%, 90%. We need to suffer nevertheless, but we reduce the power of adversity in our lives. Let me give you an example. I may have talked about this last time. When I was in Clearwater, I spoke to a group in Baha'i Center, and a lady about 40 years of age, highly educated, came to me and spoke very briefly about her suffering. I don't know, she didn't tell me what it was, the source of it. I told her to read, it was very little time, I told her to read the Tablet of Patience by Baha'u'llah, the tablet revealed to the believers in Nairis. You cannot imagine what they went through, these devoted believers in Nairis. They escaped through mountains with their ladies, with their babies, no food, no water, just to save their lives. You cannot imagine what they suffered. And this tablet was revealed in their honor. I told this lady to, I didn't ask her name. I don't know who she is, and it doesn't matter. I asked her to read this tablet. So next year I came to Clearwater, and again I spoke to her in a meeting, and she came to me and said, "Thank you for telling me about this tablet, about this episode." In the English word, we use the word episode. Now I am praying for more suffering. Can you imagine this? I told her, "You're ahead of me. If I can manage with the sufferings, my own pain and adversities and suffering, that's all I can do. You're praying for more suffering." This is the power that is untapped, that we do not use when we are not connected to God. Suffering is regarded as a blessing, and every day I thank God for all the suffering that I've endured, because I would not be where I am today. It is the greatest blessing. I would even go that far, because the ultimate test of our faith and our character is suffering. When we are under pressure, we turn to God. And I will also like to add that we should never blame God for our suffering. God would never, ever cause anyone to suffer. It's the laws of nature that he created cause us suffering. When you read in the writings that God does this and that, it doesn't mean that God himself directly causes the suffering. He allows the laws of nature to work their way, and these laws are the best. And blaming God for our pain and suffering is a terrible mistake. When I was in Florida, I was told about a lady who I think she taught biology in some college. Maybe some of you know her. I don't know who she is, but they told me about her marrying late in her life, maybe her second marriage, I don't know. But then she lost her husband. And they told me that she left the Baha'i faith because she said, "Why did God take my husband away from me?" She blamed God for all the mistakes her husband made in nutrition to die at that time. So never, ever blame God. God will not cause harm. The Bible says God will not harm even an ant, an innocent ant, let alone harming people. So we, by disobeying the laws that God has created, we bring about all this disease and suffering upon us. God is completely innocent. His justice is beyond our comprehension. But all the things that happen to us, we can benefit from them. And the worst of them is pain and suffering, that I had a major share of it. And I'm really grateful for what happened to me. I never complain. I thank God for everything that happened to me. And I'm 87, and 13 more years, if I live, I make it to be 100. I have accomplished all my goals by then. I have still a few goals left. Any other questions? Please ask.
Yes. So there is a question about the concept of eating healthy. And I believe you've spoken at one point about how a lot of the foods that we eat is doused with pesticides. And when we're eating the foods, statistics have shown through tests that people have done on foods that we typically eat, that they're still riddled with this pesticides on the skin of these fruits and vegetables that we like to eat.
Yes. Abdul Baha says that he put his finger on the real cause of disease. He says the real cause of disease is imbalance of nutrients. Imagine one deficiency in your body can cause a great deal of disease, one deficiency. And yet there are widespread deficiencies by the tests that I've done, deficiencies in this country by the people. So what is this deficiency caused by? One, of course, is junk food, dead food that have no nutrients. Everyone knows about that. But aside from that is organic versus non-organic food. I believe that 90, maybe perhaps 90%, 95% of what people consume are not organic. So what is the difference between organic food and non-organic food? Numerous studies prove that organic food at least contains 30% more nutrients than non-organic. Imagine, you're reluctant to buy organic food because it's more expensive, but you're losing ground each time by giving less nutrients to your body. So what happens? The imbalance that Abdul Baha said, created by lack of nutrients that our body needs, craves for those nutrients. But that's not the whole story. So what do you get when you eat non-organic food? You get all those pesticides, insecticides that have proven to be harmful to us. So you create a perfect imbalance for disease. On the one hand, you have deficiency that you must restore. On the other hand, you're giving your body toxic chemicals that it doesn't need. In the last 20 years, cancer has increased in spite of all the efforts, the billions of dollars that we have been spending. In the last 20 years, cancer, if I remember, has increased by 20%. It should decline, but it has actually increased. And the news media doesn't want you to know this because you lose your trust in the system. So why are people afflicted with more cancer? It all goes back to diet on the one hand, and the pressures, the mental pressures on the other hand. You know, Jesus said, referring to our time, he said, it will be a time of stress and distress, the like of which the world has never known, nor will it ever know. We are living in that time. People are under extreme stress. They don't have time to even talk to their neighbors, to their spouses. They rush back and forth. The modern technology has taken so much time. The greatest problem is lack of knowledge. People do not read. I have a professor who comes and cuts some trees from our yard here. And I gave him a book a year ago. I said, have you read it? He said, no. He simply said, I don't read books. Imagine, he's an educated person. He has plenty of time. He teaches 15 hours a week. Yet he says, I don't read. So we have all the worst combination that you can imagine. Lack of knowledge, which is the root of all evils, as Abdul Baha says. Widespread imbalance among people, and allergy to food by repetition. That's something I can talk about later on. So we are living the worst time in the human history that Jesus predicted is so bad, and Baha'u'llah predicts that it will continue to get worse until people will not be able to bear anymore, and then they will try to discover what is the solution, and they will find the Baha'i faith. But this will come about 300 years after inception of the Baha'i faith, according to the predictions made. So we have another 130 years of suffering for mankind. In the meantime, my recommendation to all of you is to work against the greatest evil, which is lack of knowledge. Read books, subscribe to magazines. I will tell you about this, some resources that you can benefit from in this chaotic world. There are enlightened people who have full knowledge of keeping us healthy spiritually, mentally, physically, yet they remain unknown. They have no power to spread their message. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. Thank you. There is a question that we have that was sent to me privately. It says, what was the motivation to write over 30 books in religious studies and ethics?
Okay, actually, the correct number is 50 books.
50, even better, 50.
50 volumes. All my English books are now posted on Amazon. The Amazon has made the greatest contribution to the spirit of knowledge. You cannot, you order everything you want on Amazon, but you don't realize that the greatest contribution that ever any agency has made to the world is Amazon by printing. Is called print by demand. When you order a book, they print it specifically for you and send it to you. Imagine what we have done in the last 30 years. We receive orders for books. We have to process it. We have to package it. We have to go to post office, and it still makes some mistakes. You know, people, all kinds of things can happen. And Amazon does all of this without you doing anything. You have no storage. We have a storage room full of books, 2 rooms full of books, maybe more than 2 rooms. So this is amazing. We should appreciate whoever made this contribution to the world. I don't think any of you realize. And now some Baha'is are working to be able to print Persian books on Amazon. So far, they have not done so. I'm also involved and working with them to make sure that books in Farsi are also available, will be available on Amazon, but electronically, of course, they are available. Sometimes when people ask me, how did you write all these books? My answer is this. I say, the reason is that I had half the energy of an average person physically and half the mental energy of a normal person. Now imagine, because of the reason I told you about loss of blood and lack of oxygen, still I do not have adequate amount of iron in my blood. I take iron tablets every day, 3 times a day, but still I'm very low. And when you're low on iron, your brain does not get the oxygen that it needs. So therefore you have less mental ability, mental resistance, mental endurance, I should say. And in spite of all this defects in my life, I tell them that I have written these 50 volumes. And what does that prove? I am no doubt in my mind that the invisible hand has done it. I have made myself totally absolute nothingness, and I've only served as a secretary to write these books. I could not have written even one of them. And they're the most difficult books. Some of them are the mysteries of the Bible, the mysteries of the Quran, and mysteries of the most holy book. Yet, for some reason, God, Baha'u'llah, the Bab, were decided to give me this honor to write 50 volumes. And my last volume is 200 pages, called The Most Astonishing Lesson in History. It is inviting Christians to investigate the second advent of Christ. We have failed to inform Christians that Christ has returned. We have a million, I should say billions of times more evidence by the prophecies that I've written in these books, billions of times more evidence that any reasonable person would need to recognize that Christ indeed has returned. So this is my final project. Please pray that I will succeed in sending this book to start with 2,000, then 10,000, then 100,000, then millions and millions of Christians. It will awaken them to the knowledge that has remained secret. This thief in the night, thief, I shall come upon you like a thief, really has been, has occurred. Baha'u'llah and the Bab have remained as a thief to the peoples of the world, especially Christian. And Shoghi Effendi says, if we fail to inform, we are accountable before God. It's just called sins of omission. We do not only sin when we commit something, we also commit sin when we fail to do the right thing. So he says we are accountable to God to inform people, proclaim the faith, not to teach the faith, proclaim the faith the best way possible. We have to go to the best expert, find the best means. I'm working on that project to inform Christians about the second advent of Christ. If you have some Christian friends, or if you're interested in reading, it just actually the final version came to me yesterday. I've had many people helping me revising it many times. God knows how many times. Finally, the last version came yesterday. If you have interest in reading it or sending it to any Christian friends, let me know. Many people have helped me. I'm sending it to numerous individuals. So this is my final effort to awaken a world that is sound asleep at this dark night of ignorance, spiritually, physically, mentally, socially, everything you can imagine. We're living in the age of ignorance rather than age of knowledge. This is my answer to you, why I wrote those 50 volumes, because I had half energy as a normal person, yet this was accomplished with grace of God. God selects the weakest link to produce his power. In fact, there is a verse that says, we bless those who are weak, mustazafin in Arabic. God blesses the lower you are, the closer you are to God. The higher you take yourself, the farthest away from God. So maybe all my suffering has made me a candidate for this blessing to reach, especially Christians and also Muslim. I have a book addressed to Muslim, 900 pages, Baha'u'llah in the Quran, that is being translated into several languages. So I hope I answered your question. Surprise you even more. Any other question, please ask.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have one person has their hand raised, and this will be the last question for today. Eileen, do you still have your hand raised, or?
Well, I took it down because someone else asked my question, which was the last one about all the books that he's written. And I'll just add one thing to it. Dr. Motlagh and his books are not as well known as they should be, in my opinion. They are wonderful. And I have quoted from some of his books in my own books. And I would urge everyone to go online to Amazon and check out what's available there. And he's probably listed under Hushidar, Hushidar Motlagh. That's his formal name.
Thank you for sharing. I do not believe I deserve your comments, but I appreciate your kindness. Yes, my real name is Hushidar, Hushidar, and this is a Zoroastrian name. I came from a Jewish background. All my ancestors of Jewish faith, my parents actually were Jews, and yet my name selected from Zoroastrian scriptures is, Abdul Baha says, the title of the Bab. Hushidar is one of the attributes of God, according to dictionary. One of the names of God, I should say, not attribute. One of the names of God is Hushidar. But Abdul Baha says is the title that is used in Zoroastrian scriptures in reference to the Bab. Dar Hushidar. Dar means door. So it means, literally means the door of wisdom, which every messenger is, of course. And the Bab was, his title was unknown to many of you, is Hushidar. Maybe you could use that name for your children. Thank you for your comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for coming today. It's about time. It's 12:30. We appreciate your questions, and more importantly, we appreciate your patience as during this presentation we cut out for a short period. But we are thankful that Dr. Hushidar Motlagh was able to join us today and to discuss this topic. And of course, we understand that we have a continuation of this topic where we'll discuss about the means of nutrition that we can utilize to help live a better life that is less susceptible to disease, one that is based on proper nutrition and proper eating habits particularly. So I hope everyone, having heard today's talk, has enjoyed it. I understand if you have more questions now than you had answers, but time is time, and it is time. We wish you all a very beautiful day. Thank you, Dr. Motlagh, for joining us today. For further explanations today, if you go online, you'll see on clearwaterbaha'is.org, you'll see we have multiple talks as we go through week by week. But we also recommend you go to globalperspective.org. That is where you'll find the materials from Dr. Motlagh, and he has a little item on health and nutrition. It is a bit of wisdom that he's been able to gather from not just reading the Baha'i writings, but also, as he mentioned, from his reading into nutrition. We hope you have a beautiful weekend. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.